Okay, call to order the council meeting. We have pinks for the council meeting, I believe. Yeah, we have one pink. Could I motion to approve the agenda as amended? Moved by Councillor Kahakawila, second by Councillor McKinnon. Discussion. Those in favor, opposed, carried. Public participation to the council meeting.
Jay Shukin, 5340 Bond Road, and also speaking as APRM president. And maybe this is my last comment in that role. Councillor Epp, I should have mentioned something. Again, the flashing speed signs both through the village and near the stables.
The crosswalk.
The crosswalk, yeah. I think they're brilliant. I obey them all the time, so excellent work there.
Thank you.
The question I had is when we might see the bylaw enforcement policy. This was reviewed a number of weeks ago. There seemed to be consensus among council about the changes. And one thing I have to do is I have to applaud council for taking the comments that the APRM had, such as you were able to, and Bev Bacon as well. I think there was a very important additions that we made, especially if you look back to the very first meeting and the policy that was brought forward. I think it's changed tremendously. One of the big changes is the fact that there will be an explicit statement about bylaw enforcement, and especially a consideration of past issues that may have happened in terms of bylaw issues and in terms of what the enforcement action could be. And specifically, I'm going to raise 3659 Souk Road, which has been the scene of numerous bylaw issues. Bylaw violations for sure, but numerous bylaw complaints. And there has been another bylaw issue, as I'm aware of, at this property. So council, with the passing of that policy, will have a good tool to make an enforcement action against this property owner where there have been numerous complaints and numerous issues. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jay. Kara?
Thank you, Jay. The bylaw enforcement policy will be coming forward to the next council meeting in September.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's very interesting sitting here listening to everybody talk at all the different meetings. And one of the things that comes out for me, the outstanding thing, is the ability to actually participate at public participation. When people talk about the community that we live in, regardless of who you are, but that you actually live here, there are so many wonderful things about this community. And some of the highlights for me has been volunteering. Speaking of the lights, when Councillor Epp contacted me, I think it was a year ago in the spring, could we sit down and talk about these crossings, where the trails are and where the roads are. Now, a year later, we see that we have these flashing lights. Yes, it might be urban, and I've watched people go across there, and I've heard people say, you know, crosswalks are a false sense of security. That depends on the people using them. If they don't look before they cross, that's a problem. If they don't push the light button, that's a problem. And I've seen all sorts of users at this particular crossing, but it is working, and I thank you for that, and I thank you for the support of council. But mostly I want to say I thank the residents that actually came out the day that they did in my particular neighborhood, probably a half a dozen of them, I can't even remember the numbers, and counted all the cyclists and the cars that went by, and the walkers, dog walkers, people with strollers, people with bicycles, and kids in trailers, which nearly got wiped out, and horseback riders. 3 lanes there with a left turn in between 2 sections of S-turns on that road, and speed has been really difficult. I just really hope that this is a source of traffic calming. But again, what I wanted to commend was the efforts that went into getting this taken care of, and having my neighbors come out was amazing. We see volunteers, the garage sale, the museum, people are there every week, several days every week, probably 5 days a week, doing the things that they do inside to revitalize it and preserve some history in our community. So for those residents who want a sense of community, there's a lot of volunteering needed in our community for all ages of people. So please, everybody, step up if you can do that. It makes a big difference to belong to a place like Metchosin. Stepping outside of that, I did want to make a little bit of an announcement. There is the BC 55 Plus Games in Victoria this year, and I will be participating because I qualify by age and I can ride a horse. This is the first year that working equitation, which is a sport that's only been in Canada since 2017, will be eligible to present itself at Signage Fairgrounds, which is where all the equestrian sports will be. There are 4 members of our club that will be participating, and 6 of us actually went up to a schooling show in Glenora this weekend, and we brought home 6 ribbons. So that was really exciting for us. So if you can make it out to the BC Games, please do come out and support us. There's cycling going on through this community as well, I understand. So it's all over Victoria. And it's great that it's actually in Victoria this time. Next time it'll be in Abbotsford. I don't know what sports they'll be presenting, but it's pretty neat to have some of our own people going out to that. So I just wanted to make that be known to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shelley. Anyone else?
Hi. Bev Bacon, Metchosin resident, and I think I'm in the right meeting now. And yeah, one of my letters made it into a pink, but the other one that's hot off the press didn't. And this is addressing Mayor Rance directly, because you hold the key, because you represent us with CRD Parks. And I'm posing this as a question, and maybe you can inform me. I just learned today that CRD Parks is asking for the ability to borrow money to acquire land. And a little bit more checking, I found that every other board member of CRD approved that, except for John Rance. Did I get that right?
I'm not sure about that one, Bev. Actually, at the committee level, it was very close. I can't remember what the vote was.
Someone reported that you were the only holdout, so I wanted to convince you of why it would be good for
I will
them
be
to borrow
speaking
money.
to that when it comes on the agenda, like, you know, further down on the agenda. I think it's the last item on the agenda.
You're going to talk about that?
So I will talk about why I am convinced it's a terrible idea.
Okay. Well, if I can have my turn first. Listen up, everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, so you wouldn't expect CRD to wait till they had all the cash before they'd buy a building, right? It'd be acceptable for them to mortgage a building that they're going to buy, and that's how land is acquired now. If we, who are property owners now, waited until we had all the cash to pay cash for our property, we'd still be renting. The way it goes is land is going up faster than the mortgage rates, and borrowing money is what you do to acquire land. So I'm in full support of CRD being able to borrow money when a prize patch of forest comes up that we just have to save. And I would like you, I remember at a CRD meeting that I attended that Mayor John Rance voted for something that he qualified as saying, I'm voting this way because this is how my council wants me to vote and this is how the residents want me to vote. It's not what I think. So I'm hoping, if it's not too late, to give the authority to CRD Parks to borrow money to acquire land, that you will represent the community and the municipality and not just your own views. So maybe you'll consult with the other council members on why it's a good idea and put it out to the public. Is it a good idea? I would also like to see the levy on our property tax go higher. The land costs a lot of money on southern Vancouver Island, and it's not going to get any cheaper, and they're not making any more of it. And we have to save these patches of forest before they're all gone. We have to save them for the climate, for the air we breathe, for the wildlife. And I could go on. We'll listen to your reasons, but if you survey the people, I think we want more land saved, and it seems to fall to us to do that, especially when it's disappeared everywhere else. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Anyone else?
I just wanted to thank you guys for doing the job you do, because you don't seem to get enough recognition for how hard it is. And so thank you. And thank you everyone who shows up to council. It's the people who put in their opinions and show up who kind of create the community, and I really appreciate everyone being here. Thank you.
So thank you for showing up, and we've appreciated your presence in the last few meetings. It's good. Good to see other younger people, well, younger compared to me at least, coming out. Okay, is there anyone else to public participation? If not, I will move on to the meeting then, and that will be adoption of the minutes. We can take all three.
I'll move receipt. Move adoption.
Seconded by Councillor Kahakawala. Discussion. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now we have the receipt of the minutes, the Finance and Environment.
I'll move receipt.
Moved by Councillor McKinnon, seconded by Councillor Little. Discussion. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Move receipt of planning.
Moved by Councillor Kahakawala, seconded by Councillor McKinnon. Discussion. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Public Works.
Move receipt.
Seconded by Councillor Kahakawala. Discussion. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And now we have Parks.
Move receipt of the committee meeting July 18th.
Seconded by Councillor Epp. Discussion. Those in favor and opposed? Carried. Now, Mayor's report. We have a Verizon report which had been agreed to be handed to me. But okay. So this is a Verizon report from our in-camera meeting preceding this meeting. The first is the appointment of a youth volunteer to water new plantings at Blaney Park. The second is council approval or council to appoint Sue Lynn Taranowski as our interim CAO, corporate officer, and approving officer. So welcome, Sue Lynn. It's very nice to have you on board, and don't anybody out there scare her away. So the third one is the appointment of Tina Hansen, sitting over there at the table, as deputy corporate officer and interim head of Freedom of Information. And finally, and I hope that this will address a lot of the concerns and questions that have been expressed not only in this meeting, but many of the other meetings. And that is the release of the minutes of the supplementary, what's the name of that, the supplementary package. In essence, the reference I made two meetings ago to the minutes, the in-camera minutes as they pertained to the green space and the disposition of the green space. In order to have as much transparency as we can, Council has determined to release those minutes in their entirety as they pertain to those issues. So they will be put on the council agenda, not the council agenda, they will be, sorry, I'm sorry, a little distracted there. They will be put on the municipal website probably around Thursday. There will be some redactions on it just to ensure the confidentialities where they have to be. But it will be the minutes of myself all of the meetings that I mentioned in the mayor's report a couple of times ago, and I encourage everyone to look at them and to read them thoroughly. You will see that much of what has been said over the past several months is incorrect, that council has been fully consulted on all of the issues with regards to the disposition, and this has not been any kind of secret negotiations between the CAO or myself. This has been council directed through its entirety. So read them and please end that narrative. I have also expressed concerns about the frustrations that I've had in being able to discuss the context of why we undertook that direction. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about that, because we have received a green light to be able to discuss a little bit more thoroughly the context and as how it pertains to the Mary Hill outcomes. So I'm going to begin by saying that Metchosin has benefited considerably from having visionary people both on staff and in the community. There's been a number of marvelous innovations we've been able to undertake because of visionary people. And I'm going to say right now, I'm going to point out, I don't know if she's still here or not, one of the most visionary people is the fire chief. It has been remarkable working with her in being able to do blue sky planning and everything else. Another remarkable person to be able to work with has been our CAO. Also somebody very visionary, but also with the ability to help put those visions into a workable form. But in order to realize visions, we have to be able to discuss everything. We have to be able to look at all options. We have to be able to start with an idea. And this is how these things work in this community and in other areas. You start with an idea. Hey, you know, maybe this could happen. Maybe this would be good. And then you start blue sky conversations. And here's where people like our CAO and the chief have really been influential, is that you can blue sky everything. And when you do that, you get sometimes multiple visions. So then when you can see something that you really think will work, then it gets refined by staff. Staff looks at it. How can we actually put those visions into action? You oftentimes have to take on additional partners. So you have to have agreements. You have to understand, and each one of these partners, and this is what happened with the land swap, is that they all have to go through these processes. You have to work through the agreements. You have to look at, can this work? Can that work? All of that kind of stuff. And once you are certain that that vision can be reality, then you bring it to staff. Not to staff, I should say. You bring it before the public. But you can't bring anything before the public unless you actually know that it's going to work. So that's why you go through all of these processes. And when you're really sure that, okay, this makes sense, it can work, then you bring it to the public, and then the public can provide their inputs. Then, when you've gone through that, you go through council approval and ultimately public approval, as happened with the land swap through the referendum. And just incidentally, why we're mentioning that, the referendum, is that there was another side of this coin which really directed us to those outcomes, and that is that even though 95, 28, and 25 have not yet come to Metchosin, all assurances have been built into to assure that they will. But what that did is it froze those properties, which has prevented them from being quarried and from being sited with density housing. And if you don't believe that that would have happened, just talk to Chief Chips. He has said he would gladly tell you what he would have done with that land if we had not have done this. So I think everybody needs to understand that. So anyways, that's the process that we went through the land swap, and that's the process we were going through with Mary Hill. Mary Hill has been a consideration. The preservation of Mary Hill has been a consideration and a goal of every council since incorporation. And for people long before that, Mary Hill is a jewel. The possibility of, and it's been something that all of our previous councils have talked about, but the military still had it, and there was never really an impetus to do anything about it. But when the military declared it surplus, it meant that Mary Hill was on the block. The opportunity came along thanks to changing legislation that enabled us to be able to find a way of preserving it through an indigenous protected area. And most, I mean, you all have seen the standstill agreement and everything else. So how do we do that? Here's an opportunity, a one-time opportunity to preserve one of the most important ecological, environmental properties anywhere on this island, probably in British Columbia, and also have something that partnerships with First Nations, partnerships with other agencies that are unprecedented. And it's actually probably even more historic, if you would like, than the land swap. So how do you do that? You do the process that I was talking about. You start blue skying. What's the vision? The vision is to protect Mary Hill. The vision is to have it an indigenous protected area. The vision is to have Chiano First Nation have full title of that land and not have to develop it, which they have a full plan to do. This concept and this vision was discussed with this council right from the beginning of the term, starting with Councillor McKinnon and I briefing this council on December 10th, 2018, and going on from there. We're unable at this time to release that particular set of minutes until we have further consultations with our partners. But the fact is that we have been pursuing this as an option for Mary Hill. How do we generate revenues? What options are available to us in order to enact our portion of influence with regards to making it an indigenous protected area? And one of those options has been generating the necessary revenues to offset the purchase cost and the additional ongoing revenues to Beecher Bay. One of those options, and we have pursued other options. Other options are being pursued right now, but one of them was the sale of the CRD, of the green space to the CRD to generate the necessary revenues. And we're not talking about the $200,075 or lowball offer, because I've explained that probably, 20 times in this whole thing. The reason that was low is because it's park to park and it's valued differently. This council determined that that was not an appropriate option at the time and stopped it. The concept was presented to the CRD board by the Chiano First Nation fairly, I mean, several, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago at a public meeting. Further discussions as a result of that occurred at the board level and Parks Committee staff, and Parks Committee regarding the possible means of achieving CRD support for the Mary Hill outcome, making it an Indigenous protected area. The CRD staff were authorized to visit the sites and determine the feasibilities. This is all part of the processes that you have to follow through before you go to the public to make sure all of this can actually work. The process was accelerated when the parks received an opportunity to expand the park through a time-sensitive purchase of a portion of a person's private property. So there was another property that was involved. CRD said, we've got an option to buy this property. Let's talk about the whole thing and at least put together some kind of an understanding so that we can take it to the public. Well, because of the low ball offer, the fact it was a standalone, we didn't believe that it would. I mean, there was a number of reasons. Council decided not to proceed with that. Is the option dead? As far as this council is concerned, yes. As far as future councils are concerned, they may choose to bring back that proposal, that concept, that option, when other options have been looked at and maybe not have proven to be a road forward to achieve the IPA. The next council may bring that forward as part of a larger package, perhaps, to ensure that there is that we can provide the necessary funding to achieve the IPA. That's going to be up to future councils, not this one. So I know this has taken a while, but this is the process on how visions are realized. And this particular vision of the Mary Hill IPA could be world class, seriously world class. And it could also help to protect and preserve our own rural objectives. This is bigger than Metchosin, what we're talking about here. So I hope that helps explain the context of our decision.
No, it doesn't, John. It doesn't cut it at all. You've just told us everything that was exposed by us looking up through FOI. But what you're not dealing with is a goddamn buffer that was promised to the residents. So now you're saying Mary Hill is more important? So another land swap?
What I'm giving you
when
is...
When do we trust you?
Well, read the minutes. Read the minutes and you'll see who to trust.
Okay, John?
John? Yes, certainly. I mean, this is irregular. This is part of the council meeting, but go ahead.
I have somebody very involved with that whole negotiation, and they told me at very higher up, Mary Hill has nothing to do with the buffer area.
Well...
So who am I supposed to believe?
Well, if we can get approval to release the minutes that of the previous 2 or 3 years, and beginning from December 10th, 2018, you will see that what you have been told is absolutely incorrect.
From you?
From me, what?
You've just told us everything we already know. What we're still waiting to hear is what are you going to do about the buffer?
Avril, I have explained that this council is doing nothing, that the sale to the CRD is a dead issue. the next council is going to be faced with how do we fulfill the necessary contributions for us in order to achieve the preservation of Mary Hill. Now, I would...
Preservation of the
Okay, listen, Avril, that's enough. I'm not getting into a debate. This is irregular. I've let you go too far on this already. So, anyways, that is the context, as I have said. That is what has led council unanimously to go through the process that we did to investigate whether the CRD purchase to enable the IPA was a feasible approach. And we had to go through all of that before we would come to council. When we were going to come to council, it would be then put to the public via referendum, and the public would get an ample opportunity to say yes or no based on the information that we could then provide. A future council, next council, is likely going to have to do that. Now, we would hope that there will be other options that will enable us to protect Mary Hill and see the vision completed, but it may not. But
can I just ask why is Metchosin responsible for protecting Mary Hill? Why is it just us that has to come up with the money?
It's not.
Okay, so the minutes will explain all the other.
The minutes will explain if we are able to release the minutes. Now, there's going to be a release of the minutes over the past year that had to deal with the actual sale. And there is contextual statements in those minutes that will see that what I'm saying is accurate. As for the meetings that took place prior to that, beginning at the very beginning of this term and actually before in the previous term, if we can release those, they will explain thoroughly the context and everything that has taken place and what has motivated this responsible council to pursue whatever options can be pursued in terms of achieving the IPA. And it isn't just this one option, but the sale, the whole purpose of exploring and going through this process was just to determine the feasibility of it. And the public would always have had the last say. So that's something that really needs to be understood. Anyway, I would encourage everybody who is sitting here and those who are not sitting here who just walked out, I would encourage you to get a hold of Sharon J. at Shiano First Nation and take a tour of the place.
Isn't that funny? That is the funniest thing you've ever seen.
Well, I'm glad.
We know them. They are neighbors.
Yeah, that's right. And if anybody wants to see Mary Hill, you can take a tour, but it has to be established by Sharon J. And I know some of the mayors have, or at least were invited to take a tour of the place. Mary Hill is a jewel, like I said, and the potential of what could be achieved there is the most important thing this community could ever see done. So, again, if you get an opportunity, take a tour of the place, and a simple phone call to Sharon should be able to get you on a tour. That's the end of the report. Sorry to take so long, but I thought it was necessary. Look at the minutes that get released on Thursday, And I hope that we'll be able to get a release on all of the minutes at some point so you can see where the truth lies in all of this. We'll move on then to business arising. We have the Finance and Committee recommendation, the request for the RCMP policing, community policing. Councillor McKinnon.
I'll move that Council provide funding in the amount of $2,914 to the West Shore RCMP Community Policing Employee Program for 2022.
Second.
Second by Councillor Little. Discussion. Those in favour? Opposed? Carried. Public Works recommendations regarding the Village Square implementation.
I recommend that Council approve in principle the Metchosin Village Square implementation plan.
Seconded by Councillor McKinnon. Discussion. Those in favour? Opposed? Carried. Now we have the Parks Committee recommendation, signage from Weir Beach to Taylor Beach.
Yes, I move that signage from Weir Beach to Taylor Beach along the foreshore that Council approve. Number 1, sign for Weir Beach parking lot at the end of Sandgate Road. Number 2, sign on the eastern portion of Weir Beach on the rock face. Number 3, sign for Taylor Beach parking lot at the end of Taylor Road. Number 4, request to staff to send recommendation of signage to the CRD for placement at the end of the trail at Devonian Park. And B, that's it.
Seconded by Councillor McKinnon. Discussion. Those in favour? Opposed? I guess Councillor Kohaka-Will is in favour. Okay, that is, I am opposed. So then, make note of that. Now we have the Metchosin Museum Society request.
The Metchosin Museum Society requests to construct a portico on the Pioneer Museum building. That Council approved the Metchosin Museum Society request to construct a portico on the Pioneer Museum building and refer the matter to staff for forwarding the request to the Agricultural Land Commission.
Seconded by Councillor Epp. Discussion. Those in favour? Opposed? Carried. Let's see. Staff report regarding the development variance permits, 4252 Metchosin Road.
Rent.
Go ahead.
I move that we approve the application for the development variance permit for number 2204.
Councillor McKinnon.
I'll second it for discussion.
Go ahead.
Have we heard back from the notices sent out to the neighbors? I haven't seen any feedback on that. Apparently the notices were sent out, but I haven't heard any of the responses. Yeah, without that I can't support this.
Sure. Okay, 5-minute recess while we get the pertinent information and maybe some of us can meditate.
So I won't be joining you in Whistler.
Oh no?
Yeah, I thought, well, if I was considering coming back to council, it would be a worthwhile investment of taxpayer dollars, because I'm a big fan of UBC and Leonora.
Yeah, I can understand that. I wouldn't if I wouldn't have either in your position.
Yeah. Anyway.
Too bad we were fun.
I wish I was in Whistler, but I'll be up there for the, I was there this summer already for their BioBlitz, and we'll be back for their Fungus Festival in October.
So you're getting your Whistler trips in. Your
I get my Whistler time in there.
Yeah, well, that's good.
But UBCM is fun, and I always consider it a useful investment.
Yeah, I hope so. It's a long time to be up there.
It's expensive to go to Whistler.
Yeah. Was it? Yeah, I like to go at least once just to see, just to experience it. But it is a lot of money. Really? Really? Wow, that's a long time ago. Oh, really? Oh, really? Went to the one at, in Vancouver last time. It was live.
They had the walking truck circling.
Oh, really?
It was a lot of fun.
Well, when the one I was at, they had. Well, yeah, you were there too, and they remember they're protesting outside the Chinese. Remember?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe you should go. Here. Do you know what brings it on? Do you know? Smell?
What's that?
Really?
11?
Wow.
Well, I don't
For
know,
heaven's
it's hard to
sakes.
say. There will be no question. Question for the Okay, are we all ready? Please, can we get this meeting over with? Lisa, do you have the information here?
And there has been no receipt of the neighbor's support or objection to the application. It is the applicant's responsibility to canvass the neighbors and provide that to the district. So my advice is that you postpone your decision and we resend out letters, or you deny the application.
Can I? But we also send out notification to the owners or to the.
Yes,
we've already done that.
You're absolutely right, and there has been no public participation going forward. However, you, in accordance with your policy, and I don't.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say I would suggest that we do postpone this to the September.
Yeah.
Okay, make the motion.
I move that we postpone this to the September 19th meeting, and that we reissue letters to the residents within the 60-meter area.
Seconded by Councillor McKinnon. Discussion. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Schedule of the regular council and standing committee meetings.
There was an error made with the
So I move that we change the schedule of regular council and standing committee meetings to make that notification that UVCM is indeed September 19th, not the 12th. Or sorry, it is the 12th, not the 19th, and the meeting will be September 19th.
Second by Councillor Kalakawila. Discussion. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Reports for information. We can take all of them.
Move receipt.
Moved by Councillor Kalakawila, seconded by Councillor McKinnon. Discussion. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Correspondence. Town of View Royal. Just their report.
Move receipt.
Moved by Councillor McKinnon, seconded by Councillor Little. Discussion. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now we go to the final item of business. This is Bev's favorite. CRD. Municipal Consent Bylaw. Councillor McKinnon.
I'll move that council consent to the CRD adopting bylaw number 4506, the Regional Parks Loan Authorization Bylaw number 1, 2022.
I second that.
Second by everybody. Take your pick. Seconded by Councillor Epp. I think she was slightly ahead of that. A discernible difference there. So, okay. Councillor McKinnon.
I can't imagine a more important thing for CRD to invest public funds in and the protection of green spaces for future generations. I think the work that they've done through the acquisition of not only C2C Greenbelt and Souk Hills Wilderness, but also the watershed catchment areas will be looked upon as visionary investments by future generations, and I'd like to see the work continue. If we don't do it in the next 5 years or so, it's going to become impossible, I suspect, both financially and just physically. So I think this is a really important resolution. I'd like to see Metchosin support it.
Anyone else? Councillor Epp and then Little.
I support it as well. I think it was $3 a household per year, and I think that's a pretty cheap contribution to help them get as much parkland as possible, which I believe is really important.
Councillor Little.
Yeah, I echo both my colleagues' concerns and comments, and this will be valuable for the CRD for the southern tip of Vancouver Island, and I would highly recommend that we approve this.
Councillor Kahakawala.
We've recently asked CRD Parks to look at property in Metchosin, and one of the reasons why we did that was because they have the resources to be able to manage parks in a much better manner than most municipalities can. And I think to be able to provide them with the stability to create more regional parks, regardless of whether they're in Metchosin or not, is inconsequential. But they have the ability to do so, and to allow them to be able to do this borrowing loan gives them the leverage needed at the time that it's needed to be able to move forward with more acquisitions.
Okay, my turn. Bev. My turn, Bev.
You're outvoted. Ha.
As I said at the CRD, I think this is a terrible idea. But you need to understand the context of this. I chaired the Parks Committee in the late 90s for several years. And during that time, we were faced with having to undertake a further borrowing, because our borrowing had been spent out for purchase of parks. And I sat there and looked at the graph that showed how much we were going to be paying it off, and we would be still paying off that borrowing. Well, I think it was 2020 when it finally ran out. It was the payback schedule was huge. We would have bought a bunch of parks, and then we would have spent the next year, several 10, 15 years paying it off, which would have prevented us from buying anything else. So I sat and had a few sleepless nights as the chair, and then thought, well, why don't we come up with, why don't we do it differently? Why don't we do it as a acquisition fund? So instead of us paying interest, we pay instead into an acquisition fund that bears no end. I mean, then it's our money, and we won't be paying any interest on it at all. It wouldn't be borrowed. It would be continuous. I talked to Chris Costin, who was my vice chair at the time. We worked on the proposal, explained it to a committee of parks, an advisory committee, and explained it to the board ultimately. And it was accepted. And in fact, it was actually brought into completion when Karen was the mayor. Actually, it was in the following board. And as Councillor McKinnon has said, I mean, this is the most successful thing that we've ever done in terms of park acquisition, because we had that continuing income that was approved to originally by a referendum of all the voters in this region. We had, initially it started at 10, and it went to $20 per household contribution into the acquisition fund. The acquisition fund, at the end of the acquisition fund, which was replaced by this proposal, we were generating something like $3.5 to close to $4 million a year from the acquisition fund. And the acquisition fund actually had, I don't know, I think it was $8 or $9 million in it, to be added to nearly $4 million a year on every subsequent year. So the idea was proposed then to borrow $50 million and get rid of the acquisition fund. So the $3 is not, I mean, the acquisition fund, the money that is being generated on the acquisition fund will be put into paying off the debt, but we are still going to be incurring debt. So instead of having a fund that was repeatable every year, and in the 1 year where we needed to spend more than we had in the fund, and that was with the purchase of Sandcut Beach and the Jordan River properties, we borrowed, in essence, we spent more than we were going to take in that year, and then just closed down for the next year the expenditures, and then it balanced back out again. Then we sold some of the property, and then the fund got built back up again. So it was a very workable thing. And the beauty of it is because we had the guaranteed ongoing money in the fund, we were able to partner with third party. Okay. Well, let's have the resolution now, so I don't have to. We resolved to go past 10.
Do we have to?
Come on! I only get to say this one more time. So.
I begrudgingly make the motion that we go past 10.
Seconded by.
Sure.
Andy, those in favor?
Should.
Good. Okay. So we had third-party participation in many of those purchases, and we were able to leverage the acquisition fund far more than anybody anticipated. So as a result, we've added thousands of hectares of parkland to our parks, to regional parks. And a lot of that was because we were able to, because of the acquisition fund, we were able to leverage that with Habitat Acquisition Trust, with the old land TLC, places like that, with neighborhood groups, with municipalities, and then it went on and on. The leveraging that it enabled us to achieve all of that. This borrowing concept came up when the interest rates were in the basement. Now the interest rates are going up, they're rising. So it's going to get to the point that I was so horrified with as Parks Chair back in the 90s, where you're going to be looking at a huge debt load paid off. You're going to have a one-shot opportunity. The money's all going to be there. You'll go buy these properties, and then there was not going to be anything left, and there's going to be a burgeoning debt for years that will prevent us from acquiring more properties down the road. I am convinced that we will get less parkland under this proposal than we would under the continuing acquisition fund. That's why I was opposed to it then, and I'm opposed to it now. Councillor McKinnon.
I agree with you 100%. I was one of those third parties back when I was doing a lot of work with the Habitat Acquisition Trust. It's a much better funding model. And if I thought that we could go back, that CRD could go back to that model, I would support it in an instant. But it's not a question right now as to whether this represents a better system than the old funding system. It's a question of whether this represents a better system than nothing. And I think it does. I agree with you 100% on the premise that we had an exceptionally good funding mechanism in place, and CRD decided to discontinue it. But just because they did something stupid doesn't mean that we need to also.
If I can comment on that, is that I don't think that means we go back to nothing, because the acquisition fund has been diverted. I think that if we were to say, if municipalities were to reject this, we would just go back to the acquisition fund. That has been approved. It's not, we wouldn't go back to nothing. Anyways, Councillor Hockerwell.
But how likely is it that they would actually go back? Like, I mean, we're at the point where we are now, and I agree with Councillor McKinnon. What are the chances of you being able to sway all of your counterparts at the CRD to not do this and to go back?
I don't know what would happen if an individual municipality turns it down. I know that there were other people who felt just as strongly as I did about. I mean, Jeff Young was one big example. He was every bit as passionate about retaining the acquisition fund and not borrowing as I was. So I don't know. I don't know what would happen if we said no. Councillor McKinnon.
According to this memo here, municipal consent is required from 2/3 of the participants. So one municipality saying no wouldn't change anything.
But 5 or 6 would.
Yeah. My preference would be to support this unless you feel there's a very, very real chance at the board that we can do something better.
I can't say that. Councillor Little.
Yeah, I urge you to adopt this as well. You talked earlier about visionaries, visions and visionaries, and I think this is visionary for sure. Any kind of loan, as the fiscal cycles go up and down. Certainly at the CRD, they have very talented people that could renegotiate mortgages and loans, and I have a lot of faith in that they would renegotiate it when it was available, just like we can if we have a mortgage at home. And I also must say, as the Parks Chair for the District of Metchosin, we've been inundated with people during the pandemic attending, as is their right, parks in Metchosin, CRD parks and parks in Metchosin. I think it's incumbent upon us, and it behooves us, to secure green space parks for future generations.
Councillor Rapp.
Well, I agree that interest rates, are going up, but also so are land prices. And we also, especially on Vancouver Island, there's a huge amount of pressure on landowners and large tracts of land to be developed. So I think that, I agree about the acquisition fund, but I do think that the land is not going to be there forever, and I think that the increase in price of land tends to balance off the interest rates and paying interest a bit.
Anyone else? I would just comment that we have increased the acquisition fund as inflation has increased 2 or 3 times now, and that certainly would have been what we would have done in the future to offset the land prices. But anyways, I'm not going to belabor this any longer. I'll call the question if there's no further debate. Those in favor? Opposed? I'm opposed. Motion carries. And that ends the business, and we're too late for the question period, so I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Kahakawala, seconded by Councillor McKinnon. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thanks.